Today's reading begins in Joshua chapter 9, starting in verse 3. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and to Ai, they also resorted to a ruse, and went and made as if they had been ambassadors, and took old sacks on their donkeys, and old, torn up and bound up wineskins, and old and patched sandals on their feet, and wore old garments. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. They went to Joshua at the camp at Gilgal, and said to him and to the men of Israel, We have come from a far country. Now therefore make a covenant with us. The men of Israel said to the Hivites, What if you live amongst us? How could we make a covenant with you? They said to Joshua, We are your servants. Joshua said to them, Who are you? Where do you come from? They said to him, Your servants have come from a very far country, because of the name of the Lord your God. For we have heard of his fame, all that he did in Egypt, and all that he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, to Sihon king of Heshbon, and to Og king of Bashan, who was at Ashtaroth. Our elders and all the inhabitants of our country spoke to us, saying, Take supplies in your hand for the journey, and go to meet them. Tell them, We are your servants. Now make a covenant with us. This our bread we took hot for our supplies out of our houses on the day we went out to go to you. But now, behold, it is dry and has become moldy. These wineskins which we filled were new, and behold, they are torn. These our garments and our sandals have become old because of the very long journey. The men sampled their provisions, and didn't ask counsel from the Lord's mouth. Joshua made peace with them, and made a covenant with them to let them live. The princes of the congregation swore to them. At the end of 3 days after they had made a covenant with them, they heard that they were their neighbors, and that they lived amongst them. The children of Israel traveled, and came to their cities on the 3rd day. Now their cities were Gibeon, Chephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. The children of Israel didn't strike them, because the princes of the congregation had sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. All the congregation murmured against the princes. But all the princes said to all the congregation, We have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel. Now therefore we may not touch them. We will do this to them, and let them live, lest wrath be on us, because of the oath which we swore to them. The princes said to them, Let them live. So they became woodcutters and drawers of water for all the congregation, as the princes had spoken to them. Joshua called for them, and he spoke to them, saying, Why have you deceived us, saying, We are very far from you, when you live amongst us? Now therefore you are cursed, and some of you will never fail to be slaves, both woodcutters and drawers of water for the house of my God. They answered Joshua and said, Because your servants were certainly told how the Lord your God commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land, and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land from before you. Therefore we were very afraid for our lives because of you, and have done this thing. Now, behold, we are in your hand. Do to us as it seems good and right to you to do. He did so to them, and delivered them out of the hand of the children of Israel, so that they didn't kill them. That day Joshua made them woodcutters and drawers of water for the congregation, and for the Lord's altar, to this day, in the place which he should choose. Now when Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had taken Ai, and had utterly destroyed it, as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai and her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel, and were amongst them, they were very afraid, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty. Therefore Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, sent to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon, saying, Come up to me and help me. Let's strike Gibeon, for they have made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, gathered themselves together and went up, they and all their armies, and encamped against Gibeon, and made war against it. The men of Gibeon sent to Joshua at the camp at Gilgal, saying, Don't abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the hill country have gathered together against us. So Joshua went up from Gilgal, he and the whole army with him, including all the mighty men of valor. The Lord said to Joshua, "Don't fear them, for I have delivered them into your hands. Not a man of them will stand before you." Joshua therefore came to them suddenly. He marched from Gilgal all night. The Lord confused them before Israel. He killed them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and chased them by the way of the ascent of Beth-horon, and struck them to Azekah and to Makkedah. As they fled from before Israel, while they were at the descent of Beth-horon, the Lord hurled down great stones from the sky on them to Azekah, and they died. There were more who died from the hailstones than those whom the children of Israel killed with the sword. Then Joshua spoke to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. He said in the sight of Israel, "Sun, stand still on Gibeon. You, moon, stop in the valley of Aijalon." The sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the nation had avenged themselves of their enemies. Isn't this written in the book of Jasher? The sun stayed in the middle of the sky, and didn't hurry to go down about a whole day. There was no day like that, before it or after it, that the Lord listened to the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp to Gilgal. These 5 kings fled, and hid themselves in the cave at Makkedah. Joshua was told, saying, "The 5 kings have been found, hidden in the cave at Makkedah." Joshua said, "Roll large stones to cover the cave's entrance, and set men by it to guard them, but don't stay there. Pursue your enemies, and attack them from the rear. Don't allow them to enter into their cities, for the Lord your God has delivered them into your hand." When Joshua and the children of Israel had finished killing them with a very great slaughter until they were consumed, and the remnant which remained of them had entered into the fortified cities, all the people returned to the camp to Joshua at Makkedah in peace. None moved his tongue against any of the children of Israel. Then Joshua said, "Open the cave entrance, and bring those 5 kings out of the cave to me." They did so, and brought those 5 kings out of the cave to him: the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon. When they brought those 5 kings out to Joshua, Joshua called for all the men of Israel, and said to the chiefs of the men of war who went with him, "Come near, put your feet on the necks of these kings." They came near and put their feet on their necks. Joshua said to them, "Don't be afraid, nor be dismayed. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord will do this to all your enemies against whom you fight." Afterward Joshua struck them, put them to death, and hanged them on 5 trees. They were hanging on the trees until the evening. At the time of the going down of the sun, Joshua commanded, and they took them down off the trees, and threw them into the cave in which they had hidden themselves, and laid great stones on the mouth of the cave, which remain to this very day. Joshua took Makkedah on that day, and struck it with the edge of the sword, with its king. He utterly destroyed it and all the souls who were in it. He left no one remaining. He did to the king of Makkedah as he had done to the king of Jericho. Joshua passed from Makkedah, and all Israel with him, to Libnah, and fought against Libnah. The Lord delivered it also, with its king, into the hand of Israel. He struck it with the edge of the sword, and all the souls who were in it. He left no one remaining in it. He did to its king as he had done to the king of Jericho. Joshua passed from Libnah, and all Israel with him, to Lachish, and encamped against it, and fought against it. The Lord delivered Lachish into the hand of Israel. He took it on the 2nd day, and struck it with the edge of the sword, with all the souls who were in it, according to all that he had done to Libnah. Then Horam king of Gezer came up to help Lachish, and Joshua struck him and his people, until he had left him no one remaining. Joshua passed from Lachish, and all Israel with him, to Eglon, and they encamped against it and fought against it. They took it on that day, and struck it with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed all the souls who were in it that day, according to all that he had done to Lachish. Joshua went up from Eglon, and all Israel with him, to Hebron, and they fought against it. They took it and struck it with the edge of the sword, with its king and all its cities, and all the souls who were in it. He left no one remaining, according to all that he had done to Eglon, but he utterly destroyed it, and all the souls who were in it. Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to Debir, and fought against it. He took it, with its king and all its cities. They struck them with the edge of the sword, and utterly destroyed all the souls who were in it. He left no one remaining. As he had done to Hebron, so he did to Debir, and to its king, as he had done also to Libnah, and to its king. So Joshua struck all the land, the hill country, the south, the lowland, the slopes, and all their kings. He left no one remaining, but he utterly destroyed all that breathed, as the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded. Joshua struck them from Kadesh Barnea even to Gaza, and all the country of Goshen, even to Gibeon. Joshua took all these kings and their land at one time, because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp to Gilgal. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, starting in verse 19. Now there was a certain rich man, and he was clothed in purple and fine linen, living in luxury every day. A certain beggar, named Lazarus, was taken to his gate, full of sores, and desiring to be fed with the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Yes, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The beggar died, and he was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades he lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham far off, and Lazarus at his bosom. He cried and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that you, in your lifetime, received your good things, and Lazarus, in the same way, bad things. But here he is now comforted, and you are in anguish. Besides all this, between us and you there is a great gulf fixed, that those who want to pass from here to you are not able, and that no one may cross over from there to us. He said, I ask you therefore, Father, that you would send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may testify to them, so they won't also come into this place of torment. But Abraham said to him, They have Moses and the prophets, let them listen to them. He said, No, Father Abraham, but if one goes to them from the dead, they will repent. He said to him, If they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded if one rises from the dead. He, that is Jesus, said to the disciples, It is impossible that no occasions of stumbling should come, but woe to him through whom they come. It will be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck, and he were thrown into the sea, rather than that he should cause one of these little ones to stumble. Be careful. If your brother sins against you, rebuke him. If he repents, forgive him. If he sins against you 7 times in the day, and 7 times returns, saying, I repent, you shall forgive him. The apostle said to the Lord, Increase our faith. The Lord said, If you had faith like a grain of mustard seed, you would tell this sycamore tree, Be uprooted and be planted in the sea, and it would obey you. But who is there amongst you, having a servant plowing or keeping sheep, that will say when he comes in from the field, Come immediately and sit down at the table? Wouldn't he rather tell him, Prepare my supper, clothe yourself properly, and serve me while I eat and drink? Afterward you shall eat and drink. Does he thank that servant because he did the things that were commanded? I think not. Even so you also, when you have done all the things that are commanded you, say, We are unworthy servants. We have done our duty. Psalm 83, beginning in verse 1. God, don't keep silent. Don't keep silent, and don't be still, God. For behold, your enemies are stirred up. Those who hate you have lifted up their heads. They conspire with cunning against your people. They plot against your cherished ones. Come, they say, let's destroy them as a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have conspired together with one mind. They form an alliance against you, the tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagrites, Gabal, Ammon, and Amalek, Philistia with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria also is joined with them. They have helped the children of Lot. Do to them as you did to Midian, as to Sisera, as to Jabin at the river Kishon, who perished at Endor, who became as dung for the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb, yes, all their princes like Zebah and Zalmunna, who said, Let's take possession of God's pasture lands. My God, make them like tumbleweed, like chaff before the wind, as the fire that burns the forest, as the flame that sets the mountains on fire. So pursue them with your tempest, and terrify them with your storm. Fill their faces with confusion, that they may seek your name, Lord. Let them be disappointed and dismayed forever. Yes, let them be confounded and perish, that they may know that you alone, whose name is the Lord, are the Most High over all the earth. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 4. The soul of the sluggard desires, and has nothing, but the desire of the diligent shall be fully satisfied.